Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, yes, my friends, this is the home of conservative, not bitter talk, and I am your host, the one, the only, the ever so beloved. I'm just kidding, just a little bit. Todd Huff. It's my pleasure to be here today, my friends. If you want to be part of the conversation, share your thoughts and questions and all of that, Todd@ToddHuffShow.com is where you can email us. We may be changing the text number, just a heads up on that. Some internal housekeeping things behind the scenes here that we're working on. Folks, the left is in absolute disarray given a decision made by the Supreme Court that was released on Friday. They are absolutely, positively upset at the Supreme Court's ruling on these nationwide injunctions. I'm going to walk you through this. You've probably heard a bunch of stuff about this. I'm going to walk you through this and just make some help you make some sense of this, because there are things that are being said that are, while they certainly could come down, they will come down the road as it pertains to birthright, citizenship, and so forth. This is not something that the court just decided over, on Friday, or released on Friday. So I want to talk about this. It's very important. This is a victory, I would say, for the Trump administration. This is a victory for, I think, people who believe in the limited powers in all branches of government, including the judiciary. Freedom-loving people. This is a victory for the Constitution. This is a victory for common sense, and I want to talk about that, my friends, in this program today. Friends, before I do that, let me remind you that we're brought to you in part by Salty. They're a partner of ours. Salty.com is where you can go for more information and to place your order on a product that has been scientifically proven to lower cholesterol. That's right, my friends, to lower cholesterol. And that is something that, especially as we age, becomes more and more important. We think about our heart health, our overall health. Sometimes we spend more time thinking about maintaining an automobile, a car, truck, oil changes, tire rotations, tire changes, all that sort of stuff, air filters, but we don't necessarily think about ourselves as much sometimes as we should when it comes to proactively taking care of our health. Salty is a good first step. It's inexpensive. It's been proven to lower cholesterol. It's good for your heart. I take it. You can too. Salty.com is the website, SOLTEA. Promo code Todd will get you half off your purchase, your first purchase, and it will give you 50%. It'll give you free shipping as well. So Salty.com, SOLTEA. Promo code Todd. All right, let's talk about this issue of birthrights. Well, first, let's talk about what the court ordered or ruled over the weekend. So, this has been a problem for a long time in this country, especially in the past 10 to 15 years. You've had courts, lower courts, that have had a case brought before them. So let's say a law is passed, or let's say a policy, something that a president might direct his administration to do through an executive order. Listen, I don't want to get into the whole thing. Executive orders are not for creating law and all this sort of stuff, but there is a legitimate use for executive orders. I think some people oversimplify this. If an executive order is being used to create law and bypass Congress, that is bad. if an executive order is being used to help people understand how to implement the law through the perspective of how the administration wants to handle something, and it's within a perfectly legitimate interpretation of how something is to be done or enforced or whatever, that's legitimate. And so there should be limits on the president. The president just shouldn't, but whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or George Washington or anybody in between, it shouldn't. A president shouldn't be able to make up law and just arbitrarily say that things are a certain way. That's not good for our nation. That's not good for our Constitution. That's not good for the rule of law. It's not a good thing. But that doesn't mean, again, limited powers, just because we say we want to limit the powers of each branch, doesn't mean that there is no power within a branch. That doesn't even make any sense at all. Why would the branch exist if there was to be no power, zero power put into it? So the question is, how much power should each branch have? And as you know, as a person who's familiar with civics and the way that this nation operates, the way that it was supposed to operate as determined by our founders through the Constitution, through the legislators who have passed amendments since the founding of this nation, through the laws that they have passed and so forth, all of that stuff, you know that there are three branches. We've got the executive branch, whose job it is to enforce the law. You have the legislative branch, whose job it is to make the law. And then you've got the judiciary, whose job it is to interpret and to apply the law. And that's, again, this is a very high perspective, very high-level view looking down. We're not into the minutia, just the basics here. And so, again, Congress passes a law. The executive writes an executive order on how a particular law is going to be interpreted and enforced. And then someone out there who's actually claiming harm or that they were impacted by this law, you got to have standing, which basically means if there's a law passed in New York, I can't, unless it directly affects me, I can't claim standing. I have to say that there was, real harm. I'm bringing my case before the court. I'm coming to the court to argue how this law directly impacted me. And so what's happening is, and this is a tyranny of the judiciary when this happens, because we've got a hierarchy, if you will, of courts in this country. The highest court of the land is the U.S. Supreme Court. Their determination on an issue, if they decide to weigh in and make a decision, their decision is final as it pertains to the law and how it will be interpreted. Now, what's interesting is that isn't the end of the story. Congress can then, if they don't like what the Supreme Court has done, there's other means. Congress can technically impeach Supreme Court justices. So, you can take this in any number of directions here, but there's checks and balances of one branch over another. The Supreme Court has checks and balances over laws passed by Congress, signed by the president, by saying they don't fall under the Constitution. This part of the law, this entire law, can be stricken down because it doesn't, it's against the Constitution or part of the law or whatever. And so there's just this back and forth. The president can appoint Supreme Court justices for nomination to the court. Congress, the Senate in particular, can say this person meets the criteria, this person doesn't. The Senate has to confirm the appointees, and there's this back and forth, give and take. One branch overseeing another in one particular area, another branch overseeing another in some other particular area. And that's the way that it's supposed to work. And so you've got the Supreme Court at the top. You've got other courts beneath that. You got district courts. You've actually got appellate courts in between there. And so you've got a structure where there's a lot of federal judges out here trying to process lawsuits, interpret things, make rulings, and all of that. And so you have a law or an action taken by by the executive branch or by Congress, and some judge in one of the districts. The U.S. is broken up into districts. One of the district courts, federal district courts, makes a ruling. And they say, this doesn't appear to be constitutional. And what happens is they've been doing they've basically been saying, we're going to stop this law or this order from being enforced nationwide. And so the case before the court basically was arguing that these federal judges are overstepping their bounds because they are supposed to be interpreting the case before them. They don't have jurisdiction to apply this ruling across the country. And so the Supreme Court ruled that these federal injunctions, where some rogue judge out there somewhere in some leftist court typically can't just say, I don't like this, I'm declaring it unconstitutional or illegal or whatever, and I'm going to stop it nationwide. I'm going to stop it not just from happening in my district, I'm going to stop it from happening in all districts. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that, basically, because now you're making rulings outside of you're speaking for people that haven't brought the case before. Now, another individual could bring a case before that another federal court, and that same thing could be concluded by that federal court. There could be an injunction there. But to have an individual judge, federal judge, who just jumps in here and says that we're going to stop this from being the law of the land, basically what's happening is you're preventing the people who have won elections from implementing their agenda. And that's not really acceptable. That's not how this nation was founded. You're not supposed to have to fight tooth and nail for every political issue that you got elected on. I mean, some things are just simply, it's not a matter of whether it's constitutional or not. It's a matter of the decisions being made by the people in Congress, the executive branch, insofar as that falls under their particular powers. And so part of this is life, right? You have to let elections have consequences. That's what Obama told us back in 2000, whatever it was, 9. Elections have, and he was right. Elections do have consequences. They have consequences when the left wins. They have consequences when conservatives or Republicans win. And a federal judge, one judge, shouldn't be able to put the kibosh on all that, shouldn't be able to stop all that. That's the issue at hand. Now, why does this matter? Now, there's a lot more to this. I just want to get to the birthright citizenship portion of this because this is where the left is in meltdown mode. Because I'm telling you, if you read the 14th Amendment and you understand it in context and you understand the common law that existed when the founding fathers wrote the Constitution, they didn't write the 14th Amendment, but there was a common law regarding this idea of birthright citizenship that the founders would have all been aware of and would have ostensibly been on the side of, agreeing with that interpretation. Plus, when you understand the reason of the 14th Amendment, it's not created to be a loophole to give people who are here illegally a free pass to sneak in here, have a baby, and say, now my kid is suddenly a U.S. citizen. These are anchor babies. This creates a whole bunch of problems. It's one of the many reasons why illegal immigration was such a mess and a nightmare until this administration has come in and fixed this virtually overnight, metaphorically overnight here. So, the reason it matters, the reason that this injunction case is connected to birthright citizenship is because the Trump administration's proclamation announcement, executive order saying that they're going to interpret, basically say that birthright citizenship does not apply to people who had children here who were not supposed to be here because of a little clause in the 14th Amendment that I'll get to. And so that's why this is connected. So they didn't rule last week on the constitutionality of birthright citizenship. What they ruled on was whether individual rogue judges around the country could institute effectively an injunction nationwide based on their ruling, even though they are looking at a particular case, particular plaintiffs, people withstanding. They can't. You can't do this nationwide because Trump's birthright citizenship order has been put on a nationwide injunction. So some judge has stopped this from being the case. So you can connect the dots now. Trump's birthright citizenship interpretation has been stopped by a federal injunction by a court. The Supreme Court just said you can't take a case that's brought before a court that's got, and apply it nationwide. Now, there are loopholes. This isn't meant to be a thorough, comprehensive discussion of the ruling that happened last week. This is to lead us as a springboard into this concept, this discussion on birthright citizenship. But suffice it to say that there are some exceptions that you can turn something into a class action lawsuit. Again, this is where you get into the nitty gritty, and I'm not an attorney, nor do I pretend to be one on this program. I'm just saying that the stage has been set for the court to end up hearing Trump's arguments on what birthright citizenship is, and there is a fair chance that this is going to get turned on its head, and the left is in absolute disarray over this. So, friends, let's face it, there are a lot of companies out there that do not share your Christian values. The good news, you do not have to invest in them. At 4-8 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. They'll help you screen out companies that go against your faith and your values. They'll create a plan that is tailored to your goals. And they'll handle all the heavy lifting so that you can focus on what really matters to you. Want to see if your current investments align with your values? Well, go to 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. Do what I did. I took the assessment. You can do it too. It's totally free. And they will walk you through and help you understand what your investments, whether or not your investments are in alignment with your values. 4-8 Financial, because your values matter, my friends, and so does your money. All right, so all that being said, let's move now into this issue of birthright citizenship. What is birthright citizenship? Well, let's go first to the Constitution of the United States. Let's go to specifically the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was not part of the initial Constitution and the initial Bill of Rights. This was an amendment that was added and ratified to the U.S. Constitution July 9th, 1868. Now, there's a lot of portions to this. There's a lot of portions, sections and clauses and all of this, but we want to get specifically to the birthright citizenship portion of this amendment. Sorry, I'm typing this in. I thought I just had a summary here. I want to read the actual amendment itself. So, let me do that really quickly here. Let me read the relevant portion because it's the first. It's in Section 1, I guess, Clause 1 of the 14th Amendment. Here's what it says: all persons, right? That makes sense. That's people, every person, all the people, all the peeps who are born or naturalized in the United States. And then there's this little clause here because it's set off by commas. So the left wants you to hear this portion. I'm going to read it without. Hear me say this. This is without the clause. There might be someone out there who will literally try to read it without this important little clause that is trying to deceive you into what this means. So if I read it without the clause, this is what it says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States and the state and of the state wherein they reside, period. But that's not the entirety of this first sentence in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. This little clause says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, much like the Second Amendment, we must ask ourselves, why add these words? Because if the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to take an interpretation of birthright citizenship that simply says, you're born here, you're a citizen here. That is the oversimplistic way of doing this. There's no nation at no time that had any sense whatsoever that would have said, if you come to our nation illegally, without our permission, without being a citizen yourself, or without being a legal resident or a legal guest, you just stumbled in here and you started having babies without us knowing you were here, they're automatically citizens. That is not how this has commonly been understood. In fact, it was part of British common law. This goes way back. This isn't just something that the drafters of the 14th Amendment decided to do. This is something that had its root in common law, which would have been relevant. I did a Todd Talk about this, and a Todd Talk is 60 seconds. And I made a comment saying this interpretation is not what the founders would have wanted. Now, if I had more time, I would have gone into just what I had said to you, that there was the 14th Amendment, which was not in the initial Bill of Rights. It was not written by the founding fathers. It was written by those legislators that were in office in I don't know when it was written, but it was ratified in 1868. And the purpose here was to, again, this was in the wake of the Dred Scott case, which I got to take a break here. I'm up against the clock. Quick time out. There's context, nuance, details, all that stuff we'll get to on the other side of the break. I've got to take a time out, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. So we've been talking here about this, the ruling the Supreme Court made on Friday that was released. We're also talking about the implications that this has on the 14th Amendment. So I want to read a little bit here. This is from People magazine, which, hang in there, I know. Supreme Court issues crucial ruling on Trump's fight against birthright citizenship. The court granted Trump a win in its 6-3 ruling, which limited lower courts' power to universally block the president's executive order. So here's some information, and it's relevant here. It's relevant here, and it's a fairly decent little summary. The Supreme Court ruled on birthright citizen. It didn't rule on birthright citizenship on Friday, but that's what it says here, June 27th, making the decision to limit universal injunctions against President Donald Trump's attempted citizenship restrictions. It ruled on the lower court's ability to implement or institute nationwide injunctions. It wasn't about birthright citizenship, the issue itself specifically. The ruling was 6-3, with the court's 6 conservative justices agreeing and its 3 liberal judges dissenting. The decision limits lower courts' authority to block President Trump's executive orders nationwide to end birthright citizenship, with the conservative majority stating universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts. By the way, did you see the line Amy Coney Barrett put in? She wrote the decision. Did you see the line she had in there about Ketanji Brown? I'm writing this, looking for this. I forgot to pull this up. Ketanji Brown Jackson. I mean, it is in Supreme Court rules. The decorum and the way that it works, I guess, the way that you have your disagreements in the court. I mean, it was a brutal takedown. I'm going to see if I can find it somewhere. I'll have to find it during the break, but I do want to share that. But anyway, so the Supreme Court, going back to the article here, opinion also left the door open for further legal challenges by ruling that Trump's order against birthright citizenship cannot take effect for 30 days from Friday's opinion. So there's a little bit of a time gap here, my friends, which basically means there can't be a nationwide injunction against it, but there can be any number of things that happen here. They can try to make this some sort of a class action ruling where they would say any pregnant person, of course it couldn't say woman, in the United States without her papers could be part of this class, for example. That's a potential, at least that's my understanding, potential outcome of this. It also could be challenged in other federal courts around the country, and there could be other injunctions placed that are relevant to other districts. That could potentially happen. But this idea that there would be one court case in some courtroom, in some liberal justice's chambers, that affects every person around this country universally is not the way that this is going to go down. Since 1868, the article writes, the U.S. has followed the law of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, People magazine, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So they want you to think that by challenging the idea that you can come here illegally, have kids, have babies, think about how crazy this is. They want you to believe that is how it was written, what this was intended to do, which is ludicrous to me. So more about that here, my friends, in just a moment. But I know you're tired of this sort of stuff with these rulings and where we've gotten ourselves as a nation with some of these crazy things that we've allowed to happen for the past half century. That, by the way, is the topic of today's Todd Talk. But I also think you're tired of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that then turn around and support causes that you vehemently disagree with, these leftist lunatic causes. That's why we created Freedom Marketplace. It's a free searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative values, businesses that have vowed to not support leftist candidates or leftist causes. There's no login required, no strings attached, just good patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction as you. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net, liberty and business for all. All right, going back to this article, it says this, in his order talking about Trump, titled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship, Trump asserted that the 14th Amendment was only meant to rectify the racist ruling in the 1857 Dred Scott versus Sanford case, which concluded that black Americans were not citizens. The amendment, Trump's order claimed, has since been misrepresented, to, quote, extend citizenship universally to everyone born within the United States. The order then laid out, so this is the order that caused 22 states to sue, and then as a result of that lawsuit, there was a nationwide injunction. So here's what the restrictions in Trump's executive order says. The privilege of United States citizenship does not automatically extend to persons born in the United States. One, when that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States and the father was not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. Totally reasonable, by the way, my friends. Or number two, when that person's mother's presence in the United States at the time of said person's birth was lawful, but temporary, such as, but not limited to, visiting the United States under the auspices of the Visa Waiver Program or visiting on a student, work, or tourist visa, and the father was not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. So basically, if you're here illegally and neither parent is a citizen of the United States and you're born here, then this interpretation, Trump's interpretation, says, look, you're not a citizen. The other explanation is, let's say you're here legally, you came in on a visa program of some sort, but you're not a citizen, the father of the child is not a citizen or lawful permanent resident, and you have a baby here, you plan it out, you time it out, you get your, you come into this country, and then you have a baby. That this is Trump's interpretation, Trump's order saying that is not, you didn't just have a American citizen child. That's what Trump is saying. 22 states sued Trump over Trump's executive order, in addition to human rights groups, leading 3 different federal judges to issue universal injunctions that barred the administration from enforcing the new policy. This is the part that came undone with this ruling, not the actual case itself, not the position Trump took on birthright citizenship. The court did not consider that. That was not the merits of this particular case. So the Trump administration asked for the Supreme Court to intervene. The crux of the arguments heard by the Supreme Court on March 15th was less about citizenship and more about who has the power to change a law and enforce that change. Absolutely. That's solely what it was about. It doesn't matter in this particular case, although it opens the door for there to be other subsequent challenges, because, if you stopped Trump's birthright citizenship interpretation, his executive order, through a federal nationwide injunction, now that's going to be back. Now Trump can do something with this. So it didn't change. The court didn't say what birthright citizenship was. They simply said you can't have these nationwide injunctions from one courtroom that apply universally across the country. They might have left the door too open for exceptions or things that had to be done, but that's by and large it. So Trump appointed Solicitor General D. John Sauer opened his arguments by stating that the district court judges exceeded their authority under the Constitution by barring the enforcement of Trump's order. Conservative Justice Samuel Alito agreed in part at the time, noting his concern about 680 district court judges across the country having the power to stop an executive order. Bingo, bango. That's the issue. Now, this will apply to Democrat presidents, should we ever have one again, which I hope we don't. This will apply to any future president. One judge across the country can't stop an executive order from a sitting president. Now, there might be other reasons an order can be stopped and all of that, but it would have to be challenged on the merit of the order itself, not just because one judge somewhere says that this applies to everybody and I'm going to stop it. The Supreme Court is saying that is an overstretch of your constitutional authority. So, but this sets the stage for this argument that says, because now there's no other way to stop this, because if Trump's order only applies in a particular, wherever the court has jurisdiction that placed the federal injunction, then the only other way to stop this, because it's going to be messy. I mean, the Supreme Court's going to have to get involved in this, because if you're having an issue pertaining to who's a citizen, it affects every state equally. New Jersey, Arizona, Washington State, Iowa, Mississippi, Louisiana, Michigan, we're all, and if a court makes a ruling and it can't apply nationwide, then they're going to have to fix this. I got to take a timeout, my friends. Long this segment, quick timeout, back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of this Todd Huff Show. So, all right, let us play. I want to play a soundbite here. I want to play a soundbite because I want you to hear just how much the left has lost its mind over this. Ask yourself, remember this, that the ruling that happened on Friday isn't the problem to them. It is, because it opens this door. But the bigger challenge is their position on birthright citizenship, which allows people to have anchor babies in this country. their position on that is in legitimate risk of being undermined. Now, there have been Supreme Court cases in the past that, this issue, Trump's interpretation may run into precedent here where they say the Supreme Court's ruled this in the past. But keep in mind that the Roe decision was made as well, and the court basically undid that. So we're in uncharted waters here. It is totally conceivable in my mind for the court to read the text of the 14th Amendment, especially the clause that says with under the jurisdiction thereof, or subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Again, why is that phrase in that line if the drafters of the 14th Amendment weren't trying to preclude some people from being included in this if they were not under the jurisdiction? You're not under the jurisdiction if you're not legally a citizen of that country. You're not. This doesn't apply. You could certainly make that argument. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I can certainly see just on the basis of common sense and logic how that's a big, big problem. And listen, people act like Trump is the problem. They act like this interpretation is going to just destabilize Western civilization as we know it. But the reality is, look at the havoc that has been created in part by this interpretation of the 14th Amendment. People thinking if I could just get to the United States and just have my baby, we can, set up, well, they call them anchor babies, but we can have a connection to the country. And now we've got a foothold there. And now we've bypassed all of their laws on who can be here legally, who's considered a citizen, a legal resident, all these sorts of things. And they basically have manipulated the system through a loophole to get to that particular point. And that's what people have been trying to do. And it has caused wreaked havoc on this nation for some time. So I want to play a clip. I want you to hear MSNBC losing its mind. By the way, before I do that, this program brought to you in part as well by Red, White, and Brand. Red, White, and Brand helps your business put your logo on almost anything. This is owned and operated here by the Todd Huff Show, division of our company. But we help people put their logos on almost anything, be it apparel, that can be polos, hats, embroidery, screen printing on T-shirts. It could be trade show displays. It can be promotional products. It can be premium items. It can be a whole bunch of things. Awards and recognitions, my friends. redwhiteandbrand.com is the website. Check it out. Promo code Todd gets you 10% off. And if you shop online, you get free shipping on orders there. redwhiteandbrand.com, promo code Todd. With that being said, I want to play this clip of reactions on MSNBC, and I just want you to listen to this. Listen to how they're freaking out and portraying this ruling by the Supreme Court.
You, me, most people we know, we are citizens because of our birth. And once the government takes that away, once it introduces this wild, chaotic new system where it depends on your parents and you get punished if your parents didn't have the right papers, then everyone's citizenship is thrown into disarray. And advocates need to present that very clearly to the Supreme Court because, frankly, this conservative majority is very selective in its empathy. If it's only thinking about undocumented immigrants of color, then
what in the world is this lunatic talking about? The issue of color didn't come up. It's not pertinent. It's not relevant. This does not cause your citizenship to be called into question because your parents didn't have the right papers. Oh, they're here illegally, dude. What are you talking about? The way that they frame this, it's like a burglar comes into your house at 2 a.m. and they get upset that you want to hold him accountable from breaking and entering. And they say, well, just because he didn't have his key and his paperwork, his name wasn't on the lease, a big deal. It is a big deal. It's not his property. He shouldn't have been in there. They want to talk about the chaos that this is going to cause. The real chaos was how this has been interpreted and applied and taken advantage of for virtually my entire life. But he continues here.
And it might not look so hard at the 14th Amendment, and it might say, I don't really see a problem. But this is going to destabilize the fundamental right of citizenship for everybody. It is going to create massive downstream consequences in a really horrible and unworkable way. And so I hope that in this next round of litigation, the Supreme Court doesn't try to duck this merits question and takes a long, hard look at what will happen if Trump tries to implement this order, because it's chaos all the way down.
Michael, I'm sorry. I can't believe that we are asking the question, is the 14th Amendment to the Constitution constitutional?
Banging on the table.
It is crazy. And I am sorry, but people need to call. This is crazy.
It's not crazy.
They're asking us not to believe our own eyes and our own ears. They're asking us to go against everything that we know to be true. This is insane.
What is
but this is the landscape we find ourselves on now. I mean,
he's going to chime in. She's banging on the table. She's saying they're asking us to declare the 14th Amendment to the Constitution unconstitutional. No, we're asking you to interpret it the right way. We can say the same thing about the Second Amendment, by the way. Anyway, I'm out of time here, my friends. Gotta go. Have a great day. SDG.